that this is just what reminded me of my school days. We are very pleased to welcome back amongst us Anne Beer Gulati, and I would request her for the invocation for this evening. Beerman, you'll have to unmute yourself first, and we'll have the invocation from you.
मेहरवा साहेब मेहरवा साहेब मेरा मेहरवा मेहरवा साहेब मेहरवा साहेब मेरा मेहरवा जी सगल को दे दान जी सगल को दे दान काहे डोले प्राणिया तुझ रखे सिर जनहारी जिन पदायस तू किया सोई दे आधार जिन पैदायस तू किया सोई दे आधार सोई दे आधार सोई दे आधार तू काहे डोले प्राणिया तुझ राखे जा सिर जनहार जिन उपाई मेदनी सोई कर दासार जिन उपाई मेदनी सोई कर दासार कट कट मालिक दिला का सच्चा परवदगार सच्चा परवदगार तू काहे डोले प्राणिया तुझ रखे सिर जनहार कुदरत की मना जानिए वडवे परवाओ कुदरत की मना जानिए वडवे परवाओ कर बंदे तू जिचर कट ऐसा हो जिचर कट में सा हो तू काहे डोले प्राणिया तुझ रखेगा सिर जनहार तू समराथया काथिया गोचर जियो पिंड तेरी रास तू समराथया अकाथिया गोचर जियो पिंड तेरी रास रहम तेरी सुख पाया सदा नानक की अरदास सदा नानक की अरदास तू काहे डोले प्राणिया तुझ रखे सिर जनहार मेहरवा साहेब मेहरवा साहेब मेरा मेहरवा जी सगल को दे दान काहे डोले प्राणिया तुझ रख सिर जनहार तू काहे डोले प्राणिया तुझ रख सिर जनहार Thank you.
Sanjay, can you hear me?
Anji, yes, sir.
You see, all this good work which you explained our club is doing, but is not reported in the even Rotary News and in the press, which is, all the small clubs are giving good presentation in the Rotary News and other print. But we are lacking. We are doing so much great work, but it's very less reported. So organize it in a way. कोई committee बनाओ जरी press देवे matters.
Luthar Saab,
बोलो.
जड़ा oxygen on wheel होया सी ना, that has been reported in 32 newspapers and on Doordarshan.
Very good. But there
bulletin में लिखा भी है. You can see the bulletin.
Yeah,
it is
bulletin
mentioned there.
Bulletin ठीक है, but Rotary News जो मैं देख रहा हूँ छोटे क्लब छोटे प्रोजेक्ट कर रहे हैं.
Bulletin में लिखा हुआ है. Bulletin में 5-6 newspaper clipping लाया भी और लिखा भी है मैं. That was reported in 32 newspapers and video. Doordarshan da bhi link deta hai. You can click it and you see it on Doordarshan.
Good. Rotary News भी दो यार.
Rotary News तो club president or secretary they have.
Sir, valid point है, and I'm sure Rotary News editorial team would be on the mailing list of past President Dr. Vora.
Yes, they are. Bala, but Sanjay, they won't take it as it is. As I said, somebody has to follow it up.
Yes, that is what I was coming
and,
to.
Shaju is the right person who can guide us on this issue.
आप ही follow करो ना यार, Dr. Vora.
नहीं, that president has to do ना. President, secretary, they have to follow it up.
I will take this up just to ensure that people are actually, putting some time on that. And if they have any queries, because a lot of people do acknowledge and write back to you. So let me.
People do write to me also, and they acknowledge the bulletin, the projects done by us. People from other parts of the country, they write to me.
The speaker is waiting.
Wait karo.
चलो देखो आगे शुरू करो.
Sanjay, basically it is praying to God that we should not get disturbed by the circumstances. The person who has given us birth, he is going to take care of us under all circumstances. So basically this invocation was under the present circumstances when we are going through such difficult times. We have to just tell God, not lose hope in God, and continue to have faith in Him. And He is bound to look after us because He is the person who has brought us into this world. Since we have come because of Him, it becomes on Him that He has to look after us when we are in difficult times. That's the gist of the invocation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. That was wonderful, Bhima, and very well explained by Ajit, sir. There's a very popular magazine here. I'm sure a lot of you would. I'm not sure whether you have access to hard copies nowadays, but India Today is a magazine that I went through one of the new issues this afternoon, and the cover issue is on Republic of Self-Help, and I wanted to share this with all of you that it has wonderful stories on superheroes all across the country, and each story is just about a page on each superhero. It could be it is somewhere it is an individual, somewhere it is an organization, on the way people have come forward to help those in need from all walks of life. There's a story about a mother-son duo. There is a story of IITians. There are individual women who are coming forward and helping people in the city, in the neighborhood. There are artists who are coming forward, and it was very interesting. And it also set me thinking that what we have been doing in our club, I would specifically like to mention our Secretary Shuchi, IPP, Salil Bali, who also happens to be the chair of the Disaster Management Committee, and our AG, Dr. Rita, and many of you who have by themselves and in associations with Rotractors, with RCCs, and with other different organizations been, not spared any, not delayed anything, and have been in the forefront to assist wherever help is needed, and also well supported by all the members financially, in giving moral support. And a lot of you have really come forward, and most of you have supported us financially. So I would like to thank all of you for boosting the morale and confidence of this team, the members who are taking care of this, be it in food support or medical support, oxygen support, and other things. And also, as you've read in the bulletin over the past 1 month, there have been members like our past R.K. Luther, past President Veer Ramsesaria, who have also gone to the hospitals to give them whatever support they have seen is required in the hospitals, and also from our President-elect Salil Chopra. So I think the good work will continue, and we just hope the pandemic, once it ends, the good work can get focused into other areas, because there is no end to the need amongst the society that we have. And this gives us a lot of confidence that as Rotarians, we are living it up absolutely with what our purpose is here. With this, I would like to invite our Joint Secretary, Professor Dr. I.S. Dua, who would be introducing our guest speaker, Professor Michael Jones, and would also be assisting him along with Professor Michael on the presentation today on the future of food. Yes, Professor Dua.
My dear chief guest for today's function, Professor Dr. Michael Jones, President Sanjay, Secretary Suchi, Director Nitin, fellow Rotarians and Rotarians. The topic for today's talk is the future of food. Why this topic? The future of food must be correlated with the population projection for this century. And I got a very beautiful slide to show you that how the projection is that by the end of this century, the total population on this Mother Earth will be around 9 to 10 crores.
Are we introducing
9 to 10 billions. Okay. And unfortunately, the biggest jump in this population is going to be only in the developing world, not in the developed world, which has 32 countries. So with this, you have to correlate it with the type of the food which they are going at this time. And to tell all about that one, we have very, very close friend of mine who was with me for 4 years consecutively, year after year, in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, as well as in Cambridge. And we have Professor Michael Jones. I take the privilege to read his brief biodata. Professor Michael Jones was born on February 22, 1948. And that is also the average a year of birth of many of our Rotarians. And his first degree was in natural sciences, that is biochemistry at Cambridge University, UK. This was followed by a PhD in plant biochemistry at Cambridge University with postdoc position at the University of Missouri, USA in plant pathology. Then he returns to the biochemistry department of Cambridge University, our alumni, for 3 years. He was then employed as a senior scientific officer at Wales, followed with a prestigious position as principal scientific officer at Rotham State Experimental Station as plant cell biology coordinator in the Department of Biochemistry only. After 8 years in that position, he was appointed as Professor of Plant Sciences at Murdoch University in late 90s. Ladies and gentlemen, I must tell you that Murdoch University is a public university in Perth, Western Australia, and has also campuses in Singapore and Dubai. He became foundation director of Western State Agriculture Biotechnology Center in 1993, and looking at his contribution, his title was changed to Professor of Biotechnology in 2003. Professor Michael has supervised more than 50 PhD research scholars, obtained more than $40 million in competitive research, has published 2 scientific publications. Current research focuses on applying new breeding technologies to crop improvement and on translation of research outcomes to commercial implementation. He has co-founded 2 companies which are concerned with the food for the world in the coming 21st century. Thank you very much for agreeing to my request, which was given yesterday only, for lectures, brief presentation. And though the timing in Australia, in Western Australia, at this time is around 10 o'clock, quarter to 10, but he agreed, leaving his 2 other meaningful meetings which he had today also. So thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I take the privilege of presenting you Dr. Michael Jones, my close friend. Professor Michael Jones, please.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honoured to be asked to talk to your Rotary Club, and it's I have known Professor Inderjit Dua for a long time, and I know I've been very impressed. He's a very well-known internationally for his science communication, and so I think probably now the topic that he gave me, or that I was eventually agreed to, is a very large topic, future food. So I better get started pretty quickly, or I will overstay my time. So if that's okay, I think I probably should get started. If I can, let me see if I can share my screen. And what's that? Let's see. I will get going. Why is it not doing that? Let's try another one. What are all these things? I thought I got this on slideshow, so this is not. Just bear with me a moment. See what this issue is.
Do you need help?
Let's try that one, and we'll start it here. I was just trying to get it onto resume slideshow. Oh yes, right. Okay. It's not. Can you see my screen?
No, we cannot. So what I would suggest,
Okay.
Professor Jones, is that
Yes.
kindly run the slideshow and then share screen. So that works for Zoom.
Yeah, I had the slideshow actually already going, so
Okay.
I will start it again. I'll start it up again.
Okay. And then you have to share screen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Recording in progress.
Right. Let's see if this one works. Yep. Can you, right, now I've got to get back to my Zoom meeting and share screen.
Yeah. Yes. Started now, sir.
Right. Okay, good. Thanks for that. Right. So this is actually a very big topic. So I'm going to have to move quickly. Let's see if I can reduce some of this over here. Let's see. Right. Oh, sorry. No, I haven't done that right. I'll have to start again. I was just trying to get rid of a lot of the things on the edge. Right. Let's see what's happening. No, that's not going to be the right one, is it? Oh, yeah. Okay. Can you see that?
No.
No. All right. Go back, share screen. Zoom. Share screen.
Yes. It started now.
Okay. Great. Sorry about that. Well, I won't try and remove things off the edge of my screen. Right. So this is a very big topic. And I will endeavour to move through it fairly quickly. So I thought I'd start out just by pointing out where I'm speaking from in Western Australia. And you probably might know the eastern states, but in fact, Western Australia is about a third of Australia and has about 3 million people. And there are actually only 2 roads, one in the south and one in the north, connecting Western Australia to the rest of Australia, and 1 railway line. So, and it's got about 3 million people. So it's actually sparsely populated. And it goes from, in the southwestern corner is temperate through Perth, which is Mediterranean. And as you go north, it goes to semi-desert, desert, then it goes subtropical and tropical. So there's a whole range of environments here. But that bit in the middle under the Western Australia sign actually is where there's a lot of wealth in terms of iron ore. So it's a very, it's a mineral-rich state, supplying a lot of minerals, iron ore, gold, and also natural gas and some petrol as well. In the southwest, the agricultural area is in that southwest corner of Western Australia. And I thought you might, those of you who are interested in plants, might be interested in some of the sorts of plants here, because it's been so isolated. It's an area of international biodiversity, recognized hotspot of biodiversity. So you can get spring flowers, grass trees, acacias, banksias, eucalypts, and so on. And also on the left of the screen, you'll see some very interesting patterns. And this is where the water table comes to the surface, and you get these strange lakes which are different colors with algae. And so it looks like if you fly over those, you look like you're on the surface of another planet. And similarly, there are a lot of very interesting animals here. So you know about kangaroos and probably emus, but the birds, the cockatoos that we have here are black. So there's the red-tailed black cockatoos, and also Major Mitchell's cockatoo. And in the interior, you can get huge flocks of budgerigars. And of course, we've got a very long coastline. And so here's a picture of rays in the coast. Now, if you move inland a bit, agriculture is very much on large scale. So, for example, in the top left, that field of wheat is, the farm was 35,000 hectares. So this is a little bit different scale of operation from probably the farms, most of the farms in India. And so the cereals, canola, lupin, on the coastal plain, there are horticultural crops, and then the sheep and cattle as well. So I was wondering about food and how I could talk about future food. And well, I had a look at Chandigarh, what the dishes that you eat over there, vegetarian, non-vegetarian, bread and flour and sweet dishes you'll be familiar with. And I thought, well, what do we eat here? And actually, the Australian dishes are really originated from the UK. So there's things like meat pie, fish and chips, barbecues, lamb, but we also have rock lobsters and seafood. But there's a big Italian population, so we have pasta and pizza. Then there's Greek population, there's Greek food. There's a Chinese and Southeast Asian population, so dumplings and so on. And then 8% of the population is Indian origin. And so a lot of the dishes from Chandigarh are very familiar. So we have a lot of choice, actually. And it's also, in passing, a major wine producing area. So I'm not sure, I'm going to have to talk more about my experiences of food production in Western Australia or in Australia, and see, you will have to interpret how you might be able to see those technologies going ahead in India. But if we start then going back a bit, plants grown as crops are all developed from wild plants by selection and are now grown as managed populations. So they all started as wild plants, And out of 230,000 species of flowering plants, only 15 are grown widely, and these provide 80% of the food consumed by humans. In fact, more than 3/4 is provided by, from the plant side, is 12 species: maize, wheat, rice, potatoes, cassava, soybean, sweet potato, sorghum, yam, plantain, barley, millet, oats, rye, not necessarily in that order. And so it's interesting to see, well, how did these crops develop? And there's been 10 to 12,000 years of crop evolution. And in fact, agriculture, before agriculture occurred, our progenitors, our ancestors were hunter-gatherers. And so agriculture was one of mankind's major technical innovations. And that, as people then started to look at and develop crops, that allowed formation of farming and pastoral societies and civilization to develop, because people didn't have to spend the whole time surviving. Now, most plants which have been domesticated have become crops from distinct centres of origin. So in fact, most of the food that we eat, certainly in Australia, was never here, maybe even 50 years ago, maybe even only 25 years ago, some of it. And it's the same is actually true of India as well. So I'll mention that. But first of all, I should mention then that the development of crops and food was pretty much random until Gregor Mendel, who's a monk in the 1850s, discovered the principles of genetics. And although that wasn't rediscovered really until the 1900s, that gave rise to Mendelian genetics and the Green Revolution of producing plant breeding, of understanding at least some of the basis that properties of crops were not gradual. There was distinct elements or genes that in fact underlay those traits. And then in 1953, Watson and Crick discovered the structure of DNA and how the genetic material can be passed on. And that has led to a gene revolution and to genetically modified crops and gene edited crops. And I'm going to call that agri-bio. But there's also a revolution agri-tech of things like remote sensing and also in food tech. And I'll see how I can say a little bit about that at the end. So where did our crop plants come from? Well, for example, maize came from Central America, cereals from the Fertile Crescent of Iraq and Iran, potatoes from South America, pineapple from Paraguay, rice, long grain rice, chickpeas, India, soybean, short rice, China, apples, West China, East Russia, mangoes, India, cabbage, the Mediterranean. So even things like peppers were not present in India. They're not native to India. And so in your hot dishes, some of they wouldn't necessarily have been like that in the past. So I was lucky enough to travel in Iran from Isfahan to Shiraz in the spring. And here are some pictures I took of the plants. And you can see that these look very much like cereals, like wheat and barley. And these are the sort of things, the progenitors of cereal crops. And in fact, this is what your food would look like if it actually hasn't been genetically modified, because all plant breeding and selection is genetic modification. It's modifying the genetic makeup. So there would be pests and diseases. Watermelon, this is what watermelon came from. Teosinte is the progenitor of corn. Bananas, brinjal or eggplant. Carrots came from Afghanistan, and in fact they were many different colors that had been selected. The orange ones were selected by the House of Orange in Holland because that was their natural color. The House of Orange was their color, and all the Dutch always play in orange shirts, and they selected orange carrots. So you can see what lettuce came from a fairly miserable looking plant as well. And I should mention cabbage, Brassica oleracea, because many different crops that we grow all have come from wild cabbage. So kale was selected for the leaves in 500 BC, kohlrabi for swollen stems, cauliflowers and broccoli in the 1500s for inflorescences, cabbage for terminal inflorescence, and Brussels sprouts were selected and appeared about 1700s, and they were selected for lateral buds on the stem. So you can see that this wild cabbage, Brassica oleracea, has been pulled in every which way. Initially by not knowing what was happening, but by selection, and then later on, well, actually after this time, by a knowledge-based breeding. So here's another example. This is maize, and this is teosinte, which it comes from. And this was the original plant, and there are only about 6 genes difference in selection, and I'm pulling these genes together to have conventional maize, and this is only in the last 1,000 years or so. So, I mean, we didn't evolve with the food that we're eating now. That's part of that message. And that all the food that we eat, one way or another, is actually genetically modified in some way. Another thing I'd like to say is that there's a lot of people seem to think that natural equals good, which is, of course, absolutely not the case. Not necessarily the case, because in domestication of these wild species, plants, they can't get up and run away. So they have to defend themselves with chemicals, toxic chemicals. And so a lot of breeding is in fact removing or reducing the level of naturally present toxic compounds. I give you one example of that, which is fairly extreme, but for example, the curare comes from a curare vine in South America. And these Amerindians use this incredibly toxic agent, which a natural compound present in the vines, which blocks neurotransmission. It's an antagonist of acetylcholine. And so if they shoot a monkey with some of this compounds from the curare vine, then the monkeys are paralyzed and fall out of the trees. And that's completely natural. So plant breeding and natural genetic engineering. Well, as I said, conventional plant breeding involves genetic manipulation, and I'll talk a bit more about that. But certainly the bread wheat that we have contains genes for resistance to stem rust and from rye. They've been transferred by tricks of plant breeding. Sweet potato, the only reason why it's a crop is because it contains about 6 genes from a bacterium called agrobacterium, which makes it swell up. And that was an event that occurred about 8,000 years ago. So genetic engineering is in fact a natural process. And if you look at the human genome, which has 3 billion bases, there are more genes which are originated from viruses than from vertebrates. So transfer of genes between organisms is quite common. And this bacterium called Agrobacterium tumefaciens transfers about 6 genes into host plant cells and causes this thing called crown gall disease. Now we can make use of that to transfer genes we want into plants. Professor Dewar said to me, I shouldn't get too much involved, but I think it's probably necessary to discuss some of these things. So, and here, this is a comparison of breeding technologies in a simplified form. So plant breeding involves usually takes an existing cultivar and then looking for a wild species or another cultivar that has a beneficial gene. So that's this blue spot on the left-hand side. Now, so you make a cross, a sexual cross, and then you back cross against the original parent. And the idea is to transfer the blue gene, useful one, and end up with something which was like the original one, but has improved properties. But what you'll see is that in fact there's red around there. So that's called linkage drag. So you get a whole lot of unwanted genes that you don't know what they are. So the conventional plant breeding is not very precise. It's getting more precise through molecular markers and other things I won't go into. So the gene revolution allows people actually to identify that beneficial gene, to isolate it, put it into that bacterium I mentioned, which will transfer it into your cultivar, and there you are, you get the new cultivar with that gene, but without all those unwanted genes. So it's much more precise. Now, there's some different forms of that, where genes come from an unrelated organism, so it could be a bacterium, or related species that you might be able to cross, or even genetic components from the same species. Here, it's the same mechanism here, and they have different names: transgenesis, cisgenesis, and intragenesis. Right. So they're viewed differently from a legal and in some jurisdictions. So that's how these have been used, and I'll talk about that. But what has come along in the last less than 10 years really is this gene editing, which you may have heard of, where you can take an existing variety and you can mutate or change very specifically a target gene and change that to have a beneficial property. So that's called gene editing. So that's different from a genetic modification is GM and gene editing is GE. Okay, so this, I have to talk about that if I'm going to talk about the future of food. Right, now I put this slide in because what it tells you is a gene is a gene is a gene. In other words, if you isolate a gene from this little jellyfish that fluoresces, you can put it into a nematode worm and it works. You can put it into a plant, you can put it into a mouse or a rabbit or into zebrafish. And that's because what it tells you is that the genetic code is universal and it works, that a gene quite often in one organism is very similar to another organism, and you can transfer those between species. In actual fact, you can buy these fluorescent fish in the supermarket in the US and have them in your fish tank with a little bit of a UV light and they'll glow different colors. Okay, so these first GM crops then, or biotech crops, started in 1996, and at the moment there's more than 180 million hectares grown worldwide. That's about 11% of the total world food population for production. It started in industrialized countries, but now developing countries are actually growing more GM food than industrialized countries. And these are the countries where they're being grown. And it's most of North and South America and in Southeast Asia and Australia, but not in Europe, apart from Spain and Portugal. So that's the biggest uptake of any new technology in agriculture worldwide. This is why it is so successful, because in India most of the cotton is now genetically modified, and in Australia it's 99.5%. And if you look here, cotton is the crop which takes the most insecticides, sometimes 7 to 15 sprays you need to control cotton bollworm. Now, so if you do that, that's okay. Or you can use genetically resistant cotton, BT cotton, that's a gene from a bacterium here, and unsprayed, so no spray and genetic resistance. You can see the difference. And if you look at, if you have a non-GM cotton crop and you don't spray it, then you don't get anything. So this is absolutely a no-brainer, and that's been taken up very heavily in India, Australia, Japan, and everywhere where they grow cotton. Okay, so it's not just used for production though. So now the emphasis is on food for health, more healthy food. So I give you a couple of examples. One is the production of antioxidants. And so these are tomatoes which actually produce a lot of anthocyanins, and these are health compounds. And when you, if you get the juice from them, you can see how dark that is. That's not like heritage tomatoes. That is very, very dark purple. And wheat and barley and potatoes have been produced with high amylose starch. Now, Amylose is a component of starch, which is, there's two components. This one is resistant starch. If you increase that, it reduces the glycemic index and promotes bowel health. And if you have a low glycemic index, then that helps reduce the incidence of type 2 diabetes. So that sort of thing is very important to improve human health. Golden rice is another one. This is 2 genes in rice. Rice grains actually have no vitamin A. And so there's deficiencies, and this would solve the problem of vitamin A deficiency in countries where the diet is based pretty much on polished rice. And it's just about getting into production and being accepted. But funnily enough, organizations like Greenpeace have been against this, despite the fact it can save, in fact, millions of lives and stop children dying or going blind. So you might ask about the safety, because that's what people worry about, because you hear a lot of disinformation and misinformation. The answer is the absolute scientific consensus is that these GM foods are safe. In fact, they're safer than any other foods. All these learned societies like the AAAS in the US, the science is quite clear. Crop improvement by these techniques is safe. The European Commission, which has commissioned 50 projects, 4,400 groups, and spent $500 million on looking at this, have come up with exactly the same answer. And so have all the learned societies around the world. In fact, the chance of unintended changes with transgenic or GM crops is less than the risk of unintended changes occurring in new crop varieties created by conventional breeding, when you're just crossing whole sets of genes together in a relatively random manner. The other thing that has been followed, and there are some more recent studies in this, but are the economic benefits. So globally, increase in production, $168 billion. Increase in crop yields when you use GM technology, 22%. Increase in farmers' profits, 68%. Increase in no-till agriculture, saving topsoil. Reduction in chemical pesticide use. If you make crops genetically resistant, you don't need to control them with chemical pesticides. And there are other effects, including reduction in CO2 emissions, because you don't have to pass your tractor so much backwards and forwards across the crops to spray them. Okay, so this is the reason why it has been taken up. Well, these are some of the reasons. Now, there are still, as you're probably aware, though, that there are those who, for whatever reason, and it's usually not scientific, well, in fact, if you argue with them, it's not scientific, that have some reservations about GM crops. Don't know why, because all the vaccines that are used and all the COVID vaccines and insulin, they're all GM products that you inject directly in your bloodstream. So why people would be worried about one gene in 30,000 that's going to be processed and it's the same as any other DNA beats me. But anyway, that's another matter. So, but the technology has been moving on. And this technology, gene editing, you may have heard about this, CRISPR-Cas9 is often called. Now, this is a way where you can make a targeted mutation in a gene, and it involves this orange thing, which is an enzyme that cuts both strands of DNA, and it only cuts it where it's told to by this green guide RNA. So that's a guide RNA. And if you cut both strands of a piece of DNA, when it joins, repairs it, it makes mistakes, insertions and deletions. So it makes targeted mutations. And that's called SDN1. I won't talk about anything else, but that means site-directed mutagenesis. In other words, this guide RNA tells this enzyme to cut both strands here. Right. There are other forms that I'm not going to go into. And so there are lots of applications of this technology. For example, here's a couple. One is prevents pre-harvest sprouting. So for example, if you get wet weather at harvest, you can get this sprouting of grains in the ears. Well, you can stop that. Also, you can reduce the allergenicity of wheat for people who are have immune issues with eating wheat. Now, so this is in one go with gene editing, reducing allergenicity by 85%. You just cannot do that with conventional breeding. Okay, so those are technologies that are coming along very rapidly. But I need to say a little bit more because this is not the only way that we're increasing food production. Pivot irrigation, urban farming, vertical farming, food from seawater and sunlight. So pivot irrigation. On the right, if you fly across Kansas now, that's what, and you look out of your plane window, if you can get there. This is pivot irrigation. This is circular irrigation pivots, and you can see these green circles, or they're sometimes rectangles. So you can control the water and nutrients. But you can do this in the desert. So in Jordan, there's Wadi Rum, and you can see this huge pivot irrigation set up. This one's growing potatoes, actually, in the desert. So what you do need is groundwater, of course. Then you don't necessarily need to grow plants in the ground at all. So this building at the top left is actually an urban farm in California. And it doesn't need light because it is growing plants in vertical stacks using LED lights. Now, plants only need to use the blue and the red parts of the spectrum. That's why they're green, because they don't use that and it reflects it. So you only need to, you can have LED lights which only deliver the wavelengths that plants use in photosynthesis, which gives you this pink color. So you can have solar panels to generate electricity for this light, and LED lights now very efficient. So this makes this cost effective. And now you can produce, in some places they're producing 100 times the food per unit area using this vertical farming. In places like Tokyo, Shanghai, even in the Emirates, there will be net exporters of food because they're going to produce it, certainly leafy greens and a whole range of things in hydroponics and not in what you would think of as conventional farms. And here's an example from South Australia. It's called Sundrop Farms, where they're growing food without arable land using seawater and sunlight. So these are not solar panels, they're reflectors actually, and they reflect sun up into the heliostat, which collects the energy, converts it into electricity. This is seawater, which is then desalinized through that electricity, and the power used to run this whole huge glasshouse complex completely on seawater and sunlight. And sort of things that then you can grow in there, this sort of tomatoes, you can even grow potatoes in hydroponics if you want to, and then you can use robotics. So robots are being developed to recognize green tomatoes, red tomatoes, for example, and pick them, or other produce, and also to recognize pests and diseases. So there's a whole lot of things. This is in the ag tech area. And again, in foods, a great transformation in foods is coming along. So in 2050, we're going to need 71% more food, 87% less meat, 55% less resources. And certainly in the Western diet, we eat too much meat, dairy, and eggs. And we need less animal protein and more plant protein. And there is a tidal wave of change coming where science can transform the food that we eat. So, for example, there's a company here said, what if we can make meat better? What do people love about meat or dairy or fish? That's if you do eat meat. Can the plant world provide all the ingredients to recreate those experiences, flavor, texture, juicy sizzle, and the result, meat from plants, good for people and good for the planet? And the answer, of course, is yes, you can. This is one of the first companies called Impossible Burger. This is plant-based burgers. And there's huge investment in the US, right across the world, including places like Singapore. And I'll show you how they're made. So they are, they are synthetic. I mean, in the sense that you make those from plant proteins. So you get proteins out of potato. Now, actually, they've moved from wheat to soybean. They make leg hemoglobin. This is plant hemoglobin. Plants have hemoglobin. You can produce that in fermenters. Then you add vitamins, amino acids, sugars, oil components, mix it all up. You can make patties that look just like meat, but they're all plant-based, and cook those, and people can't tell the difference between that and a meat-based burger. So this is, for those, there are a lot of benefits, because here's an animal feedlot. Now, some of you may be vegetarian, and you would probably think this is a good thing, because you can avoid going from cattle going, producing meat, going to a lot of the meat. Probably 65% of the meat eaten in the US could actually be made from plants. We can't recreate steak yet, but not far off. And there are a lot of other companies that are making plant-based products. Here's one called Motif Ingredients that makes ingredients from plants for processed foods. I'll finish almost with, here's a bit left field, but a company from Finland called Solar Foods is actually making protein from electricity, water, and bacteria. Okay, they got free electricity there from hydroelectric food. So what they do is they electrolyze the water. They have bacteria present, and those bacteria, and they obviously add some salts, and it produces a powder, a pure protein powder. So it's all done by fermentation, but they produce protein. So I'll go back to that one. Okay, so what they're saying, look, soline is the protein they're producing, does not require arable land or irrigation. So basically, there's a combination of things going on which are combining agri-bio, that's the genetic part, agri-tech, that's the sensing and remote sensing and so on, and food tech, and that's modifying the foods in one way or another. And then they're all going to come together, they're coming together in a pipeline where the genetics comes at the top, then the agri-tech increasing the production, and then the food tech and processing. And there's a lot of money going into this area around the world. Finally, though, I'll just go back to the GM and G issue, because I believe some of you may be in the legal profession there. Here's a quote from a recent webinar by a professor from Rotary University. And he said, feeding the world is not a scientific problem. Science can do this through the sorts of technologies I'm talking about and things even that haven't come. In fact, it's a regulatory problem, because the regulatory issues, for example, India has a regulatory problem about growing BT brinjal, so genetically modified brinjal. Bangladesh is growing it, but it's not being grown to great effect, I would say, but it's not being grown in India because this is policy, regulations, and it's got nothing to do with science. So that's the problem, because you have to make sure, harmonize the regulations and make sure that legal and regulatory barriers do not actually make people go hungry. So I probably used up my time, so I will stop there, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Professor Michael. We'll now be opening the session for question answers, but I have a small question, sir. You did mention golden rice, which is rich in vitamin A. Is it same as the brown rice?
No, this is completely, so golden rice is completely different. It's rice which has two genes, which
Michael, three genes.
Sorry?
Genes. 3 genes, Michael, sir.
Three, okay, well, 3. Yes, all right. 3 genes, so which allow the production from a precursor that's already present to produce vitamin A. This has been actually available, freely available, made available, but it's not the science that is preventing its use. It's actually people like Greenpeace and the EU and people who, for some reason, object to this. And as there's a consequence of that. The person who started this work, called Ingo Patricus, says, in fact, this is like a war crime that this particular rice has not been made available, because it's not that there's no consequence. They could have saved millions of lives and improved the lives of many poor people had it been available. Of course, there is another thing there, and that is whether those people would actually eat rice that's yellow. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. So what I understand, it's not available for us to buy, right, Dua sir?
Nowhere in the world it is available.
Nowhere it's available.
Nowhere in the world. Nowhere in the world.
Possibly in the Philippines.
Yeah, Philippines it was available.
Philippines and Bangladesh, probably the places it's going to be grown first.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying this. We have a question from Dr. Vora. Dr. Vora, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Good evening, Professor Jones.
Good evening.
When I heard that you are going to talk about future of the food, I thought that the future may not be so bright as you have told us. So I have 2 questions. One is that is non-veg food going to come out of plants?
Sorry,
will non-veg food come out of plants?
Non-veg.
Non-veg food.
Michael, yeah, non-veg would mean meat and steak and pork.
Yes.
Yes.
Will this food come from plants?
Yes. So that plant proteins can be substituted for meat from animals.
It will come, but it's at this stage it is not coming. In future it will be like that.
It's already started. I can go to my local hamburger, Hungry Jack's hamburger chain, and they are selling plant-based burgers.
So that means those people who are vegetarian, they can have non-veg food from the plant.
They can eat those because there are
a lot of vegetarian people in India.
Yeah.
So for them it is going to be a boon.
Absolutely. And there are actually many other ways that well, there are other ways apart from one that I've shown where, in fact, cultured cells. Now that would be for people who do eat meat, a non-vegetarian. But there are a lot of different ways that people are now developing food through meat-based products, through culture, or through other ways which are not necessarily from plants, but plant protein, plant-based meats are going to come, and they're going to be a very big thing. And there's huge investment. There's billions of dollars of investment going into plant-based meats, meat substitutes.
One more question. Sorry. Have you finished?
Yep.
I have one more question. You said that there's not going to be any shortage of the food in the future, but it may be a regulatory problem.
Regulatory.
It will be a regulatory problem, but there's no shortage of food in future. This is what you have said.
What I said was that science and technology is capable of generating enough food for 10 billion people by 2050 and beyond. Now, I mean, there are problems of distribution and other things which are apart from that, but the sort of technologies like the GM technologies and gene editing technologies can, if you combine those with the remote sensing and the agri-tech and the new food tech like protein-based foods, plant-based proteins, I believe will provide enough food. Then it's a question of how it gets distributed.
Can I tell Dr. Vora also in relation to can I tell Dr. Vora about the regulatory problem?
Yes, please do.
In 2010, BT brinjal was to be approved for India, for which everyone had okayed, all the regulatory, all the scientific bodies of the government appointed committees, they passed it, approved it. But because of some political pressure and some vote bank pressure, it was not released. But in Bangladesh, it was released in 2018. 3 years have passed because in Bangladesh, and they have saved $7 billion from the insecticide by using BT brinjal. India is still deprived of BT brinjal because it is the place from where brinjal eggplant originated. This is a regulatory phenomenon. India has only one crop because of this, and that is wheat cotton. No other crop is there. That's right. I have also a question to Professor Michael, small one query, which I had made it as a slide, but now since the electricity has come, so I would like to share the screen for that slide to put a question to Professor Michael. Can I? Suruchi, can I share the screen?
Yeah, Dua sir, if just 1 second, Shaju sir has been raising his finger since long. If we might just give him a chance, and then Dua sir will. Yes, Shaju sir, please go ahead with your question, sir.
Prof, my question is, when do you foresee the arrival of genetically modified human beings on the scene?
Well, I suppose actually, the reason why there are two sexes is to make new combinations of genetic materials. So in fact, when you have children, you have a new combination, of genetic materials. So in that sense, we are already genetically modified. Now, there is an ability now, though, to, for example, if you have a genetic defect you can either select and test egg cells, for example, and see whether it's carried or not, or you could use GM technologies actually to correct that defect. Now, whether that's politically or ethically agreed, that's a different matter. But and another sort of thing is you can take out bone marrow cells, for example, and they can be modified and then reinserted back so that you actually have genetically modified bone marrow cells. And that is possibly being done at the moment. But that's a question for ethicists. That's why I work on plants and not on.
No, what you're saying is that the ticklish issue is only ethical and not the possibility from the scientific angle. That's what you're saying.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, well, ethics is what is holding back. So there was a researcher in China, and he actually edited some embryos and then transplanted, and actually children were born. And he suffered, he was criticized so much that he's disappeared now, and we don't know what's happened to him. But he did that. So that has been done, but it is not something which is accepted by the community at the moment.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. But otherwise, may I add, Shajuji, and every child born in your family or my family or anywhere is a genetically modified because of the two distant genomes.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, that is why the sexual reproduction is there. That is an evolution. Now, can I put that question?
Sure, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, please allow me to share the screen.
Yes, sir, you have the right. So please try sharing screen. Try it. Do I say?
Yes, can.
That's mine gone.
Let me.
Have I stopped sharing?
Yes, Professor Michael, your screen has been stopped sharing. Now, okay. Dua sir shall be sharing his screen with this question.
Slideshow. No, front slide. Okay. Yes. Professor Michael, this is a picture which I have taken.
Dua sir, we can't see the screen. It's not yet shared.
How can I go then?
Dua sir, first run the slideshow, then come to Zoom and click on share screen.
Zoom. I'm on Zoom.
Yeah, so there must be some option called share screen somewhere.
Yes. Screen. Yes.
Then share the slideshow. Or you can just share screen, simply just share your screen, whatever is on the screen, it will come up. Yeah, now it started. Yes.
Professor Michael and my other friend from Rotary, can you see this slide from the
Yes, sir.
side? You see, this is a picture which I have taken about 5 years back from at Tesco, UK, in London proper, or Pinkerton, where a family is buying the ration for 1 week, and it is the ration for 1 week. Okay, and family from the privileged world of West, that is UK, with 1 week of food, where your son is also there. But when I go to this part, in African family, they have, this is a 10 days meal for that one. Is the future of food will reduce this disparity as you have put it also? Can we have this disparity lessened to the help of science so that they can also get the nutritious food and everything? This is the picture from Egypt, which I had to take there also. And this is a 10 days ration. Professor Michael, please.
Yes, well, first, you were asking me, right? Well, I mean, the first one, that family from Tesco's, that was a pretty unhealthy diet. I haven't seen so many bottles of fizzy drinks and things. That seems a bit excessive to me for one week. But anyway, I take your point. What I said was it's technically possible to produce enough food, but it is a question of distribution and of people being able to afford that food. So that's a different issue from the science and technology being able to generate it.
I see. That's right. This is a question of, distribution or again regulatory mechanism.
Dua sir, can I just add, because I've stayed in the UK, I remember, whenever you go to the Tesco's and Asda's or, the other stores, you would have so if you buy 1 bottle of Coke, it would be like maybe £2. But if you buy 6 together, it's just going to be 2.5.
That's
what I realized that they lure you into bulk buying. Yeah. Things that you don't want, things that you don't want to eat, that things that you don't need, you literally throw them because they get expired before they get used. So this is one major difference that I saw between India and the UK, where they push you into with lucrative deals. You feel, oh my God, this is per piece, it's very less. Why not buy 6 of them or 12 of them?
I agree with you.
Shuchi, we have it here too.
So Michael, I have one sort of a question coming in my mind, that we are replacing animal protein with the plant protein. You are a biochemist. You know that the plant proteins are very poor so far as the essential amino acids are concerned, like methionine, arginine, tryptophan, tyrosine, methyladenine, lysine, and histidine. But plant proteins are very rich in non-essential amino acids. They are very poor in. How can we, substitute the essential amino acid with the non-essential amino acid? That is going to be the extra addition of certain amino acids, which Professor Michael, Professor Dua, Shuchi, or Mr. Dua, they need it for their day-to-day life. That is billions and billions of investment.
Well, I didn't include, but I do have a comparison of the food value of meat-derived burger also and a plant-derived burger, and they have adjusted those so that the calorific value, the fat, the other protein parts are pretty much equivalent.
The main word here is that they have adjusted, which needs billions and billions of dollars and pounds. Okay, that is the point. Why there is a constraint in Australia not to have genetically modified foods? Greenpeace?
Politics and voting. So if one party sees there are votes in frightening the population about GM and think that they'll get more votes as a result, then they will do that.
Yeah.
And so it takes courage. You have to go above the parapet. So we have, for example, we had a Minister of Agriculture here who brought that in for GM canola, which is now 35% of our canola, Brassica napus, is GM. But that person had to have courage to say that's going to be our policy. We believe that's actually the right thing to do. And then he got criticised, and then he was targeted by those people that didn't agree in the next election, and he only just managed to get in. But you need courage. You need people who are prepared to live by what they think is right. And a lot of the opposition to these is in misinformation. It's got nothing to do with science.
I agree.
If you have a debate with people who are against GM foods, usually it's not about science at all. It's about belief systems, or they've made up their mind through some other group, and they actually don't really know what it's about.
Yeah, they call America as their big brothers, but here they don't follow the big brothers, which is steam crop in America.
Well, one of the other things is that those people who are against it think that it's about big business, and it's about, they don't like Monsanto. Now, the interesting thing about gene editing is that in a lot of countries now, that has been declared to be non-GMO, non-GM. So in Australia it has, North and South America, and that's completely democratized it so that any small breeding company can use that technology if it has been deregulated and it's just regarded just the same as any other plant breeding product.
You will be happy to know that from India, Greenpeace has almost disappeared.
Yes.
Totally.
Right.
I hope same for Kelly also. I don't know.
We have a question from Mohit Srivastav. Can you please ask your question, sir?
Hello, Michael. My question is about this technology. This was really very nice and very informative, and I just can't help recollecting. It was not too far long back when I remember very nicely our Hargobind Khurana. He was awarded a Nobel Prize for discovering the structure of DNA and that stuff. And this technology called CRISPR is amazing. The way you can, there's a molecular scissor, you can cut the gene at any point and then add, and this is really beautiful. But my question is about taste. Most of my friends are there in US, and the food looks fantastic. Everything that you say can be done. But when it comes to taste, the taste between the naturally grown tomatoes and the GM, the taste definitely, I think, has not caught up. What is the reason why we have not been able to improve or better the taste, something like that? Can you tell me about that?
It's to do with storage life and transport. So, for example, if a lot of the tomatoes are picked green, so they're not allowed to ripen on the vine, and then they last longer for transport, going to storage into supermarkets, and they don't ripen on the vine, so they don't develop the same taste. So that's one of the issues. But there is actually gene edited tomato. This is a bush tomato, if you like, which actually has been designed for hydroponics. So it grows in small bunches of tomatoes that can fit in a small space in hydroponics. And those ones, they claim, are sweet and they taste just as good. I don't know. I have to tell you, though, that I'm a bit of the Philistine when it comes to food, because in a way, being originally trained as a biochemist, I see food as well, you could, if I were a reductionist, you might say, well, life is a series of controlled chemical reactions, and what you need is to put in the right sort of ingredients, like putting fuel into your car, and then the system will run. And actually, worrying too much about actual taste, well, okay, that's fine. And I mean, that's traditionally what you would do. But for example, I will just have a muesli bar for lunch, or, you know, a cereal bar. I'm not bothered so much about taste and things like that. But I mean, that's just me. But
very, very, very important, because we have so many friends from states, and whenever they come back, they are literally dying to have Indian food, you know, and so taste is very important. But I was just wondering why we have not been able to control taste for so many foods. That is I think the only reservation, or maybe you can say the complaint against GM foods. Taste does not match.
Well, anyway. I mean, it's not GM food. This is all plant breeding for a large scale production, transport, storage, in non-spoiling, for example. So I mean, a locally produced material you can allow to ripen on the vine. It then gets better flavor, and if you use it straight away, then it is going to taste better, I think. But you know, it's a question of feeding large numbers of people efficiently, I suppose, and that's a trade-off. The taste is a trade-off. But I would say that now there's equipment for mass spectrometers and NMR machines which can analyze just about every chemical in your food, and just like you can sort of reconstitute a hamburger, we know a lot about taste compounds, and in fact that could be one of the things which happens over the next years, is using that knowledge to improve the flavor and not just the production side of things. So I know in India you're very passionate about your food and taste.
I know, Michael, you are really fond of tandoori chicken. I know. You are fond of tandoori chicken. I know the way in which you used to eat tandoori chicken.
No, I will enjoy eating Indian food. Absolutely. I do, though. I once had a very hot meat vindaloo, which I thought I wish I hadn't had.
Those are the taste of the spices. Spices from Kerala. Spices from Kerala.
Yes, but I mean, maybe if you look at the history, it may be because if food storage was an issue and food went off, that spices were used to cover some of the off flavors. I don't know. That was the case in the UK, certainly.
You all came to India only in search of those spices.
That's true.
Well, I didn't, but my ancestors might have done.
I think we don't have any more questions. Sanjay sir?
No, then we can move forward. I think just Dr. Vora just put it on the chat. He wanted to thank for his questions being answered wonderfully. Dr. Vora, you wanted to say that?
No. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanjay, for giving me the chance. Professor, I wanted to thank you for answering to my queries. I really feel very happy that the future of the food is very bright.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Well, I'm positive.
Sorry, can you repeat that again? I'm so sorry. The expression of gratitude would be by Rishikant. I was just saying that you wanted to thank him for your question.
That's what I'm saying. I wanted to thank the professor for giving a very bright future about the food. So when I heard the topic, I thought it is going to be very gloomy future, but thanks to the professor, the future is very bright. The only problem may be regulatory. So that is a very positive sign.
Very, very. Keep the politics away from science.
Right. I would like to invite Rotarian Rishikant Jha for giving the expression of gratitude.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you, President Sanjay sir and Secretary Ma'am Suchi Ma'am for giving me this opportunity to give vote of thanks to such a learned and noble person in Professor Michael Jones. And thank you, Dua sir, for having Michael Jones on with us today. Thank you, Michael Jones, for the great journey that you have taken us through, the geography of Australia, which you started with, and the history of food, which we eat today. And it was a surprise, a later pleasant surprise. Earlier, it was a very difficult surprise to digest, that whatever we eat today is all mostly genetically modified food that we are having. So there is now more of a pleasant confusion that what is natural and what is genetically modified. It is a pleasant confusion. Also, yes, a fantastic fact you have put into place that the future is good, and you and your stream of science is helping the humans to have ample amount of food in future as well. I would personally like to thank you for the fact to tell you I'm a vegetarian in Indian context. For non-Indian context, I'm a lacto-vegetarian. Though no hanking for chicken or mutton or such hamburgers, but it's a very happy news for all of us that tomorrow we also can go out and have hamburgers. And there will be a very happy confusion when we are ordering in the restaurants, that whether we want to have a vegetarian chicken or a non-vegetarian chicken. So thank you so much for enlightening us, and wonderful journey of science, wonderful journey of food, which you have taken us through. It was like a time travel when you were talking about the history of how food have come up. Thank you so very much on behalf of everyone. Thank you so very much once again. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you, Nishikant. I would like to now invite our Secretary Shuchi for the announcements.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have the birthdays of spouse Tina Jain on 29th of May, which is tomorrow. Uneza Khandelia, 30th of May, and Sudha ma'am, 3rd June. Congratulations, Sudha ma'am. Happy birthday. Sudha ma'am, are you there? Okay, we have the wedding anniversary of Rotary and Rekha and Anil Mehanji on 29th of May. Congratulations to all of us. Back to you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Shuchi, and congratulations to all celebrating the birthday and anniversary in the coming week. I thought I missed something in the chat. Is there any other question? We still have our guest here.
My question is to Professor. Is he still there?
Yes,
Yes,
Yes, he is there.
He's still
Professor,
here.
I have one question there. In the Indian concept, people keep talking that processed food is not good. We should have only organic food. What is your take on this? Is processed food okay, or should we go in only for organic food?
Well, that's a very good question. And what I would say here is that actually organic food, my view is that it's not good for the planet, because the yield compared with conventional production is between, well, sometimes only 50%, 75%. So in fact, we would need much more land to be to grow food if it's organic. And what that means is that that will go into marginal areas, and that's where biodiversity lies. So in fact, it's bad for biodiversity as well, because we would need so much more land if we moved to organic. So I think in a way, to be honest, that GM food, which is genetically resistant, so you don't need to provide use pesticides, is really is actually a perfect organic food, or moving that way. And there's no reason why you shouldn't combine those two, organic and GM, genetically resistant, because that makes them, in a sense.
By GM, you mean processed food?
No.
Now, processed food depends how it's processed and what it is. But if it's tinned, canned food, probably that's not so good. I mean, fresh food is obviously going to be better, or frozen food. Actually, that can be very good. So it depends how it's processed and what the food is. But under certain circumstances, it's fine. But fresh food is usually better.
Fresh food is better.
I will add that it's a perfect scientific answer. It's a perfect scientific nonsense.
Probably doesn't taste as good either, though, the processed food.
That's because of the preservatives.
Professor, nowadays there's a lot of processed food in India. The meat is also processed, vegetarian food is also processed. We get a lot of processed food in the market nowadays.
Well, actually, in Australia, it's moving away from processed food where possible.
Even in the Western world, I've seen people have a lot of processed food.
Dr. Bora, you should use the word fresh food, preserved food. That's all.
Sorry?
Fresh food or preserved food, not organic food, because organic food is a liability to the planet.
Raja.
Yes.
Anyway, I'll talk to you on phone later. Dua,
Yes.
I'll talk to you on phone. I'll understand from Professor Dua, because I'm the editor, so I wanted to know the facts. So
Professor
Dua
Dua
will
knows.
explain to me on telephone.
Professor Dua knows more than I do about these things.
No.
He will certainly give you the answers.
So that was wonderful. I think the question hour tends to go longer than presentation. That just shows the amount of interest all of us had in your topic and what you presented. And I'm sure Professor Dua would be getting many more queries from members. Wonderful talk and really very enlightening from all of us. For all of us, I would just like to invite Rekha Men and Anil Men. It is their anniversary in the coming week. Best wishes to you. I think you were muted that time. Yes, good to see both of you. We wanted you in the frame.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for the. I would like to offer a meager sum of 5,000 rupees for the dinners, for the meals we are providing for the COVID patients.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Very gracious of you. And good to see both of you on this frame and staying until the end of this meeting. With this, thank you to all of you. I would like to take permission to adjourn this meeting. We would have the room open for 5 minutes. It's got a little late today, but we just have it.